July 1999. Yosemite stood quiet under a heavy summer sky, the kind of silence that feels almost unnatural. Then came the call. A young naturalist had stepped outside her cabin and vanished. Search teams followed broken brush, scattered belongings, and a trail that ended in a place where the forest held its breath. What startled investigators most was not the scene itself, but the possibility that the person behind it was someone familiar, someone who worked inside the park, someone everyone thought they could trust. Who was he? And what darkness had been hiding in plain sight? Welcome to True Crime Vault. Please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. And today, we reopen the case of the Yosemite Park murders, the case of Cary Stayner. They insisted he couldn't have seemed more normal, a sentiment echoed by many who knew him. "I've never seen the man violent, not even a flicker," one acquaintance remarked. Never even raised his voice, even during heated debates. He had a way of making you feel like everything was all right, like there was nothing to fear. Never made anyone uncomfortable. Quite the opposite. Really, Yosemite National Park, a sprawling canvas of America's most majestic wilderness. Millions flock there annually, lured by the promise of serenity, adventure etched against a backdrop of unparalleled, untouched beauty. The park exudes a timeless quality, a sense of security that washes over you. But lurking beneath this postcard-perfect facade lies a chilling truth. The wilderness, in its vastness, breeds isolation. Trails can vanish in the blink of an eye, swallowed by the relentless embrace of nature. Help, when you need it most, is often agonizingly distant, a mere whisper across miles of unforgiving terrain. July 22, 1999, Dr. Desmond Kidd, a man of 36, served as the medical director for Yosemite National Park. He'd just clocked off a grueling 24-hour shift at the park's clinic, a period marked by a relentless stream of emergencies. Exhausted, he retreated to his cabin, yearning for rest. But the insistent buzz of his pager shattered the silence. He was urgently needed to join the search for a missing woman, the dispatcher's voice laced with urgency, mentioning potential law enforcement implications. In his 2.5 years working in the park, Dr. Kidd had been involved in numerous rescue operations, plucking lost souls from the clutches of the wilderness. But even before he steered his vehicle toward the small hamlet of Forster, he was warned that this search was different, steeped in an unnerving sense of foreboding. Joey Armstrong, a vibrant 26-year-old naturalist, was expected to spend the weekend visiting friends. Her failure to arrive ignited a chilling wave of fear. For the past year, Joey had shared a cabin within the park with her boyfriend and another roommate. That cabin was now a crime scene, sealed off with police tape. Her white pickup truck sat parked in the drive, packed with bags for the anticipated trip. Yet, the air was thick with evidence of something sinister. Telltale tire tracks marred the earth, broken sunglasses lay scattered like fallen tears, and a lone red mechanic's hat sat discarded, an ominous clue. The search team meticulously planned their strategy, deciding to begin close to the cabin. They divided into 5 groups, fanning out to cover the sprawling surrounding area. Dr. Kidd, along with 4 others, ventured into the woods along Crane Creek, their eyes scanning for any trace of the missing Joey. It wasn't long before they stumbled upon unsettling signs of a struggle. Fresh footprints disrupting the forest floor, ferns and grass trampled underfoot, and young saplings snapped like twigs, all hinting at a desperate flight. In a narrow ditch, choked with 3 feet of stagnant water, Dr. Kidd noticed the glint of sunlight reflecting off a metallic object. It was a key ring. Just beyond it, partially submerged in the murky water, he saw something far more disturbing. The body of a woman, clad in a white t-shirt and blue jeans. As he cautiously approached, a horrifying detail slammed into him, stopping him in his tracks, turning his stomach inside out. "Jesus," he muttered, a wave of nausea washing over him. He turned and fled back to the lead ranger. "We have an 1144, he reported, his voice trembling, using the code for a deceased individual. He followed it up with a chilling statement. "She's been decapitated." December 4, 1972, Merced, California. 7-year-old Stephen Stayner was walking home from school along Yosemite Parkway when a man approached him. The man, exuding an unsettling friendliness, claimed he wanted to speak to Stephen's mother about a donation to a church. He led Stephen towards a parked car where a 40-year-old drifter named Kenneth Eugene Parnell sat waiting. The man, a co-worker of Parnell's, was described in one report as a simple-minded individual. recruited to assist Parnell in abducting a child. Stephen climbed into the car, and Parnell started the engine. He soon pulled over at a payphone, returned to the car, and chillingly informed Stephen that his parents no longer wanted him, and that he would be going with him now. And with that, Stephen Stainer vanished. Stephen had almost reached home. That's when it happened. A man in a car offered him a ride. It was a scenario ripped straight from the nightmares of every parent, the very situation against which they constantly warned their children. The next morning, a chilling emptiness hung over the second-grade class at Charles Wright School. An empty desk stood as a stark reminder of Stephen's absence. When he failed to return home, panic gripped the community. Merced was soon mobilized, desperately searching for young Stephen. Stephen's disappearance consumed his parents, Kay and Delbert. They threw themselves into frantic searches, their lives now defined by a desperate quest to find their son. They plastered the town with flyers, erected billboards bearing his image, and even sought the guidance of psychics, grasping at any sliver of hope. Kay, crushed by the overwhelming weight of her son's absence, grew distant and emotionally withdrawn, rarely showing affection. Delbert, openly devastated by the loss, also struggled to cope, his heart shattered into a million pieces. Stephen's room was preserved as a shrine, untouched by time. No one was allowed to enter. In the shadow of grief and fading hope, the couple's other children navigated their own pain. Stephen's older brother, Kerry, just 11 at the time, was profoundly affected by his little brother's abduction. He would often find his father in Stephen's room, silently riffling through his clothes, tears streaming down his face. It wasn't just the Stainer family that was irrevocably changed by Stephen's abduction. The entire community was gripped by fear. Parents were terrified, and many children were now forbidden from walking to school alone, their innocence stolen by the darkness that had descended upon their town. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and months into years. Yet, for the Stainers, time remained frozen, trapped in that single, terrible afternoon. Every phone call sent their hearts racing, a mixture of hope and dread consuming them. Every knock at the door could be the moment he came back, the miracle they desperately prayed for, or the moment their worst fears were confirmed, shattering what little remained of their world. Stephen's siblings also grew up within this suffocating atmosphere of grief and unanswered questions. They lived in a constant state of uncertainty, unsure of what the future held. They had no idea that Stephen, against all odds, was still alive, enduring a living nightmare. His kidnapper, Kenneth Parnell, had a history. He had previously served time in prison for abducting and sexually abusing an 80-year-old boy in Bakersfield. After abducting Stephen, they spent the next 7 years drifting between cabins, trailer parks, and seedy motels, living a nomadic existence fueled by fear and manipulation. Stephen had been drugged during his first few weeks in captivity, a cruel attempt to erase his memories. Over the next 7 years, he was forced to call his abductor Dad, while being subjected to unspeakable abuse, his spirit slowly being broken. He was even enrolled in a local school under a fake name, Dennis. The school, shockingly, failed to check his records, remaining completely oblivious to the fact that this child was actually the missing Stephen Stainer, a ghost in plain sight. March 2nd, 1980. Stephen's older brother, Kerry, was driving home from a camping trip, revisiting a place the family had frequented before. He was with friends when a news bulletin on the radio stopped him cold, sending a jolt of disbelief through his body. His 14-year-old brother, Stephen, had escaped his kidnapper and would be returning home that very afternoon, 7 agonizing years after he was stolen from them. Kerry later confessed that he was so overwhelmed with excitement that he nearly drove his car into the river, his emotions a tumultuous torrent. It was true. Now 14-year-old Stephen was coming home. He had survived his unimaginable ordeal against all odds, a beacon of hope in the darkness. And he wasn't alone. With him was 5-year-old Timmy White, who had been kidnapped just 16 days prior. Stephen told police that he couldn't bear the thought of Timmy suffering the same horrors he had endured. He knew he had to fight for their survival, to seize their freedom. So, when the opportunity presented itself, he grabbed Timmy's hand, and they escaped, embarking on a desperate journey towards freedom. The pair hitchhiked and walked over 40 miles to Ukiah, driven by an unwavering determination. When they finally reached the police station, Stephen uttered the words that would forever change his life. "I know my first name is Stephen. There he is. There he is." The words echoed through the station, marking the end of a nightmare. Stephen's return was met with unbridled joy and media frenzy. News vans lined the quiet streets, satellite dishes sprouted from front yards, and reporters clamored at the family's doorstep, eager to capture the story that so many had believed would never have a happy ending. Some friends and professionals gently suggested to Stephen's mother that counseling might benefit him, helping him process the trauma he had endured. But Castana dismissed the idea, insisting that it wouldn't be necessary. The family was already under immense strain, struggling to navigate the sudden shift from believing Stephen was likely dead to having him back under their roof, a jarring transition that challenged their very foundation. School offered little solace for Stephen. Classmates bullied him, cruelly mocking his sexuality because his abuser had been a man. Kenneth Parnell was eventually apprehended, and the Stainer family was thrust back into the harsh glare of the spotlight as he went on trial, their lives once again laid bare for public consumption. Stephen testified that Parnell had brainwashed him into believing that his family could no longer afford to care for him and that the courts had granted Parnell custody. Stephen said he had always been taught to trust adults, to believe in their honesty, so he believed Parnell's lies, a child's trust exploited in the most heinous way. While the evidence was deemed insufficient to prosecute him for sexual abuse, Parnell was convicted on kidnapping and false imprisonment charges. After an 18-day trial, he was sentenced to 8 years and 8 months in prison in February of 1982. He would serve only 5 years, a paltry sentence, for the devastation he had caused. After his release, Parnell, driven by his insatiable depravity, repeated his heinous crime, enlisting the help of another accomplice to abduct yet another young boy. He was caught and sent back to prison, where he would eventually die in 2008, a fitting end for a monster. For the Stainers, Stephen's return should have marked the end of their nightmare, the triumphant closing of a horrific chapter. But life didn't simply snap back to normal. The family remained fractured, the pain lingering beneath the surface, never fully spoken about, a silent burden they carried within their hearts. As the years passed, Stephen's abduction faded from the headlines, becoming just another story that the rest of the world moved on from. But in the mountains that the family had always loved and explored, in the seemingly idyllic sanctuary of Yosemite, a new darkness was quietly taking shape, a sinister force lurking in the shadows. Nearly 20 years later, the discovery of Joey Armstrong's decapitated body in July 1999 sent Yosemite into a state of panic, shattering the illusion of safety. Joey Armstrong, who grew up in Orlando, was a beloved member of the Yosemite Institute staff, a shining light in their community. She was described as creative, brave, and full of life. If she was afraid of something, she would confront it head-on, fearlessly throwing herself into any challenge. She had long dreamed of becoming an instructor at Yosemite, a goal she finally achieved. Joey was in her element there, doing what she loved, embracing everything the park had to offer. She was cheerful, energetic, and passionate about sharing her love of nature with others. She loved taking children on hikes through the park's backcountry, teaching them about its history, its wildlife, its native plants, and insects. She would even tap dance in her hiking boots to make her students laugh, bringing joy to those around her. She and her boyfriend, Michael Raffaelli, a fellow instructor, lived in a rustic cabin a few miles away, affectionately nicknamed the Greenhouse. "I love it here in this house," she wrote to a friend back in Florida. "I love Michael with my soul and every last cell in my body. I love the big meadow with all its daisies and incredible history." On July 21, 1999, Joey arrived at work around 8 a.m., and her day seemed perfectly normal. She mentioned to her colleagues that she was a bit apprehensive about spending the night alone in the cabin, as both her roommate and boyfriend were away. Just before sunset, she began loading her car for her trip, but her car never left the driveway. What made her case even more terrifying for the people of Yosemite was that just a few months prior, a woman and 2 girls had vanished in another brutal crime, a case that police believed they had solved. Now, they were faced with the unsettling possibility that they had been wrong all along, that the killer was still out there, lurking in the shadows, ready to strike again. 42-year-old Carol Sund, her 15-year-old daughter, Julie, and Julie's friend, Sylvia, a 16-year-old exchange student from Argentina, had unwittingly triggered one of the largest search operations in the history of the area. Their disappearance, sending shockwaves through the community. Carol was an extraordinary woman, a dedicated child advocate, who would attend court to be a voice for the voiceless, fighting for those who couldn't fight for themselves. Helping people and serving her community was the very essence of her being, her life a testament to her unwavering compassion. Julie, much like her mother, was a bright and ambitious young woman, always striving to excel and give her best in everything she did. She approached life with enthusiasm and a genuine desire to make a difference. Julie and Silvina had been friends since before they could walk, their bond unbreakable. For the three of them, this trip to Yosemite was meant to be the adventure of a lifetime, a chance to create lasting memories together. Carol's father, Francis Carrington, recalled the joy in their voices when he spoke to them on the phone that day. They were having the time of their lives, he said, their laughter echoing in his ears. After dinner at the Cedar Lodge restaurant, where they were staying, they headed back to their room, number 509, tucked away in the far west wing of the lodge, a seemingly safe haven. Their plan was to return to the red Pontiac that Carol had rented, drive to the airport, and meet Carol's husband after their Yosemite adventure came to an end, but they never made it. They vanished without a trace. Police swiftly arrived at the lodge, and a search for the missing trio commenced immediately. But the room offered little in the way of clues. They hadn't checked out. The towels were damp in the bathroom, but there were no clothes, and the car was gone. There were no obvious signs of foul play, so the initial assumption was that they had become lost or trapped in the vast wilderness. Search teams fanned out across the steep granite slopes and dense pine forests, their hopes dwindling with each passing hour. A plane even soared above Yosemite, its pilot scanning the landscape for any sign of the missing women, hoping for a breakthrough from above. Carol's mother, also named Carol, and her father, Francis, rushed to Yosemite to assist in the search, driving tirelessly for miles, desperately hoping to find some trace of their loved ones. Francis even searched the garbage bins at the motel, meticulously sifting through the trash, looking for sheets stained with blood, any indication of violence. As he searched, he noticed something unsettling. The maintenance man for Cedar Lodge was lurking nearby, peeking around the corner, his gaze fixed on him. Francis felt a sense of unease, a feeling that something wasn't right, though he couldn't quite articulate what it was. His primary focus was on finding Carol, Julie, and Silvina, his mind consumed by worry and desperation. The terrain was treacherous and unforgiving. Miles upon miles of wilderness stretched out before them, where a single wrong turn could leave even an experienced parkgoer stranded and invisible. It was an immense, daunting place, in which three tourists could disappear without leaving much of a trace, swallowed by the vastness of nature. And there was no trace, nothing to indicate their whereabouts. This led officers to consider the unthinkable. Had they been abducted? The chilling possibility sent a shiver down their spines. For weeks, hundreds of FBI agents, California Highway Patrol officers, and National Park Service rangers scoured Yosemite, deploying helicopters and search dogs in their relentless pursuit. On March 19, 1999, just over a month after their disappearance, a hiker stumbled upon a burnt-out Pontiac along a remote logging road, miles and miles away from Cedar Lodge. It was Carol's missing rental car. The fire had been so intense that it reached the towering trees, scorching branches 25 feet above. Inside the trunk, investigators discovered the charred and bound bodies of Silvina and Carol. But there was no sign of Julie. Scattered around the car were some shoes and clothes, offering a glimmer of hope that maybe Julie had somehow survived the ordeal and managed to escape. Investigators and agents intensified their search of the area, driven by the hope that Julie was still alive somewhere nearby, clinging to survival. One of the items recovered from the scene was a camera. It contained the usual snapshots that people take on their trips, capturing moments of joy and adventure. But the last few photographs sent a shiver down everyone's spine. They depicted Carol, Julie, and Sylvia, their room at the Cedar Lodge on the night they went missing, relaxed, laughing, and preparing for bed. Then, there were no more photographs. A chilling silence captured in the absence of images. Fear swept through Yosemite in a way few had ever experienced before, an invisible wave of dread washing over the community. This was supposed to be a sanctuary, a haven from the troubles of the world. Violent crime was almost unheard of. For years, the park had prided itself on being one of the safest stretches of wilderness in America, with crime rates so low that rangers rarely dealt with anything more serious than the occasional theft or lost hiker. But now, that illusion of safety had been shattered, leaving the community vulnerable and afraid. Parents called in a panic, their voices trembling with fear. Youth group leaders desperately sought advice, asking which trails to avoid, their concerns amplified by the uncertainty of the situation. Visitors who had once wandered freely now stayed close to guided tours, seeking reassurance in the face of growing fear, their carefree exploration replaced by a cautious sense of self-preservation. One of the residents staying at the park was chatting with one of the maintenance men, expressing her dismay that Julie hadn't been found yet. He replied that he knew that feeling all too well. His brother had once gone missing, so he understood the anguish of not knowing. He voiced his hope that Julie would be found soon, offering a seemingly sympathetic ear. Then, just a few days later, a letter arrived at the FBI office. It was a hand-drawn map, showing a trail leading from Highway 120, with an X marked on the shore of Don Pedro Reservoir. The note accompanying the map chillingly read, "We had fun with this one." The FBI agents wasted no time, driving to the location indicated on the map, their hearts pounding with anticipation and dread. They released a search dog, who quickly made a discovery. Julie had finally been found, but the circumstances were heartbreaking. She was hidden in dense underbrush near an overlook on the Don Pedro Reservoir, just a few miles from where the car had been abandoned. Her life brutally cut short. Her throat had been slashed in a vicious and senseless act of violence. By the spring, the FBI had identified two primary suspects from Modesto. They were ex-convicts with violent histories and a propensity for drug abuse, a dangerous combination. Michael Lewick and his half-brother Eugene Dykes were both being held at the Modesto County Jail, Lewick on charges of shooting a Modesto police officer and Dykes for parole violations and drug possession. Behind the scenes, FBI agents leaked information to the media, stating that the men were linked to the murders through acrylic fibers analyzed at the Bureau's lab in Washington, confident that they had their men. In June, James M. Maddock, head of the FBI's Sacramento office, went as far as to say, "We have all of the main players in jail, but we are in no rush to charge them," exuding an air of certainty and control. The news brought a sense of relief to the community. The individuals responsible had likely been apprehended, and they could finally breathe a little easier, start to heal, and try to rebuild their shattered sense of security. But now, Joey had been murdered, and a chilling realization dawned upon them. Perhaps they had been wrong, their assumptions misguided. The true killer, the architect of this terror, was still at large, lurking amongst them. Joey's mother contacted the FBI upon hearing the news that a body had been found. Her voice filled with a mother's desperate hope and fear. She asked if the person had red hair, like Joey. They couldn't provide her with an answer, leaving her suspended in agonizing uncertainty. Then, she saw it on the front page of the newspaper, "Yosemite Naturalist Beheaded." That was how she found out. A devastating blow delivered in the stark reality of print. The fear returned, more potent than ever. Park rangers were inundated with calls from worried residents and visitors, desperately seeking information and guidance, asking which areas might no longer be safe. Their voices trembling with anxiety. Requests for guided hikes surged as visitors sought reassurance in the face of growing fear, clinging to any semblance of safety in a world that had suddenly turned terrifying. Then, finally, someone came forward, a glimmer of hope emerging from the darkness. A worker had driven past Joey's cabin around the time she had gone missing and noticed a distinctive blue and white 1979 International Scout parked outside, an image etched in their memory. When police checked the records, they discovered that there were only two such vehicles registered in the area. One of them belonged to the maintenance man at Cedar Lodge, the very same place where Carol, Julie, and Sylvina had been taken from. A chilling connection. This prompted the police to issue a "Be on the lookout" alert for the vehicle, their suspicions intensifying. Just a couple of days after Joey's murder, two rangers spotted the same vehicle parked along California 140 in the Merced River Canyon. Climbing down to the riverbank, one ranger and a Mariposa County detective found a man sunbathing, naked and smoking a joint, seemingly unconcerned by the world around him. He introduced himself as Kerry. The officers confiscated his drugs, but allowed him to leave, a seemingly innocuous encounter. However, the vehicle remained at the forefront of their minds, a nagging suspicion that couldn't be ignored. It was surely not a coincidence. The FBI compared the tire tracks from the crime scene with photographs of the vehicle's tires, and found an exact match, solidifying their suspicions. 2 days later, the 37-year-old Kerry was eating lunch at a clothing-optional resort near Sacramento when officers moved in and arrested him, bringing his reign of terror to an end. Jeffrey Rinnick, who was an FBI special agent at the time, would later be the one to break Kerry, to coax him into confessing. He was able to build a rapport with Kerry, establishing a level of trust, a crucial element in the interrogation process. His patience and skill would pay off when he requested to speak with Kerry alone. When Special Agent Rinnick entered the room, Kerry was slumped in his chair, visibly burdened, clearly harboring a dark secret. Over the following 6 hours, he unburdened his soul, making a horrifying confession that would send shockwaves through the nation. He admitted to the murders of Carol Sund, Julie Sund, Sylvina Peloso, and Joey Armstrong. A litany of violence that defied comprehension. He was the Yosemite Park killer, the friendly maintenance man who had assisted guests at Cedar Lodge, who had observed Francis Carrington searching through the trash, who had casually mentioned that his own brother had once gone missing, his words now echoing with sinister meaning. This man wasn't just a witness to tragedy. He was its author, the orchestrator of the horrors that had plagued Yosemite. His name was Cary Stayner, Stephen Stayner's brother, a chilling twist of fate that defied explanation. He chillingly told the FBI that he had fantasized about harming women since childhood, a dark seed planted long ago, and that he had been powerless to resist his urges to kill, a disturbing claim that hinted at a deep-seated psychological disturbance. For months, the killer had been hiding in plain sight, quietly working at the Cedar Lodge while investigators desperately searched for answers, their efforts unknowingly thwarted by the very man they sought. FBI agents had even interviewed Cary Stayner twice early on in the case, but dismissed him as not being involved, lulled into a false sense of security. He had struck them as polite, ordinary, unremarkable, someone who blended seamlessly into the background. On top of that, his own past, the tragedy that had befallen his brother, made it almost unthinkable that he could have become such a violent offender himself, his history seemingly providing an alibi. What most people knew about him came from the headlines surrounding his brother's abduction, his identity forever linked to that horrific event. But who was Cary Stayner beyond the headlines? He was born on August 12, 1961, and raised in the farming town of Merced, California, a seemingly ordinary beginning. He was the eldest of 5 children born to Delbert, a hard-working maintenance worker who toiled for 18-hour shifts during harvest season, and his wife Kay, who ran a daycare and worked various food service jobs in high school cafeterias. Their lives centered around providing for their family. The Stayner family lived in a small house on Betty Street, a modest home filled with the everyday joys and struggles of family life. Cary attended the local public school and spent his summers swimming in the pool in the backyard and playing outfield on his baseball team, enjoying the simple pleasures of childhood. He was shy, reserved, rarely showing any signs of being upset or shaken by the events unfolding around him, a quiet observer in his own life. When Cary was 11, his world was irrevocably turned upside down when Stephen was abducted, shattering the normalcy of their existence. His family was suddenly thrust into the midst of a story that was well beyond their control, under intense scrutiny and media attention, an experience that few could ever comprehend or even begin to understand. As the years passed, with unanswered questions lingering about what had happened to Stephen, life for the family carried on, albeit in a profoundly difficult way, forever marked by the absence of their missing son. Some of the Stayner family's neighbors, those who knew them beyond the headlines, could see the lasting damage that Stephen's kidnapping had inflicted on the family, the invisible scars they carried. "I think it must have really affected Cary," said Michael Coleman, who had lived next door for 2 decades, his voice tinged with sadness and understanding. While his brother was missing, Cary attended Hoover Intermediate School, where he was placed in a gifted 7th grade class, demonstrating his intellectual abilities despite the turmoil in his life. He later attended Merced High School and spent much of his time doodling, reading comic books and listening to heavy metal music, finding solace in the worlds he created and the music he embraced. He was known for drawing caricatures of the people around him, transforming classmates and acquaintances into exaggerated, cartoon-like figures, a talent that set him apart. This artistic skill led him to become the cartoonist for the high school paper, and many of those who worked with him recognized that he possessed a bright future, a potential that seemed limitless. He was the oldest cliché in the world, the proverbial quiet guy. "He was always drawing," said Jack Bongart, who worked on the paper with him, his words painting a picture of a solitary and introspective young man. "I always thought the next time I saw Cary's name in the newspaper, it would be for a cartoon, not for something like this," he added, his voice filled with disbelief and regret. For the most part, people remembered Cary as someone who kept to himself, a loner who preferred his own company. As other boys began dating, no one seemed to recall him ever going out with a girl, his romantic life remaining a mystery. Some girls confided in his friends that they were interested in him, but Cary never seemed to pursue anyone, his focus directed elsewhere. A longtime neighbor named Victoria Flores Tatum remembered seeing a darker side of Cary, a glimpse beneath the surface of the quiet and reserved young man. When he was 16, one of his sisters had a sleepover. One of those in attendance that day was Victoria, only 14 years old at the time. She recounted a chilling incident. Carrie had allegedly snuck into her room as she slept, violating her personal space by reaching under the bed and grabbing her chest. Though she bravely told him to go away, he soon returned, standing stark naked in the doorway. Again, she firmly told him to leave her alone, and this time, he relented. Carrie, at 18, had lived through his formative teenage years without his younger brother, Stephen. Now, against all odds, Stephen was back. For those close enough to observe, Carrie's internal conflict wasn't outwardly dramatic, but it was undeniably present, a low simmer beneath the surface, as the family struggled to navigate the unfamiliar terrain in the aftermath of a situation that the rest of the world had only witnessed through a screen. In 1991, a book titled I Know My First Name is Stephen by Mike Eccles was published, offering further insight into the family's ordeal. One quote from Carrie revealed a poignant moment of hope. "I remember going out one night after Stephen disappeared, gazing up at the stars, and making a wish that my brother would come back home. It became a nightly ritual, almost every clear night, until Stephen finally returned. I never told anyone, but I wished upon a star that my little brother would come back." When Stephen finally did return, Carrie's reaction was complex. "I walked several blocks away from the house," he confessed, and then looked up at the stars, about to make another wish. "But then it hit me. Steve was home. So, instead of wishing, I thanked the star." A miniseries of the same name was also produced, and screenwriter J.P. Miller immersed himself in the family's life for months. A process that unearthed Carrie's simmering resentment. "His head was all bloated out," Carrie reportedly said, referring to the attention Stephen received. "We never really got along well after he came back. I guess I was jealous. I'm sure I was. I got put on the back burner, you might say." Overshadowed by the prodigal son. A particularly telling piece of footage captured the family gathered in their front yard, smiling for a press conference. Everyone, that is, except Carrie. He stood stiffly at the back, a picture of discomfort, before simply walking away. Instead of pursuing the bright future once envisioned for him, Carrie drifted aimlessly through a series of mundane jobs, from moving furniture to installing windows and shower doors. Outside of work, he often sought refuge at friends' houses, numbing himself with drugs and losing himself in the mindless entertainment of sitcoms. Beneath the quiet, almost withdrawn exterior, disturbing urges churned, impulses that he confessed he didn't fully comprehend. He confided in a coworker that he had been diagnosed with obsessive-compulsive disorder, but casually dismissed it, claiming he could manage it by self-medicating with drugs. Though he reportedly dated a few women briefly over the years, he seemed incapable of forming any lasting, stable, or meaningful relationships, forever trapped in a cycle of isolation. In 1990, more tragedy struck the family. Police were summoned to the house Carrie shared with his uncle Jerry. Jerry was found dead in his bedroom, the victim of a shotgun blast to the chest. Carrie was questioned but provided an alibi, stating that he had been at work at the time of the murder. He mentioned having seen a homeless person lurking around the property shortly before the incident, but the lead proved fruitless, and the case remained unsolved, a haunting question mark hanging over the family's already troubled history. One of his last jobs was as a glass cutter. One day a friend found him in a disturbing state, repeatedly punching a piece of wood, his hand badly cut in the process. He confided that he had been consumed by the urge to get in his truck, drive it into the office, kill his boss and everyone else inside, and then torch the place. His friend managed to get Carrie to a psychiatric center where he received counseling. Not long after, he returned to work, collected his paycheck, and never went back, casually mentioning that he was thinking of moving to Santa Cruz. He would later be arrested in 1997 for possession of marijuana for sale, a further sign of his unraveling. In the summer of that year, he took a job as a maintenance man at the Cedar Lodge, a motel in El Porto, situated along Highway 1040, the main artery leading into Yosemite National Park. He handled a variety of tasks, from plumbing repairs to setting up pool furniture, attending to the endless stream of small jobs necessary to keep the motel running smoothly for its many guests. On his days off, he was known to relax by sunbathing naked at a few secluded spots along the Merced River, a disturbing habit that hinted at his growing detachment from societal norms. One consistent trait of Carrie's was that he always carried a backpack. This backpack, later referred to as his murder kit, contained a chilling array of tools, a gun, duct tape, and a knife, a testament to his dark and meticulously planned intentions. He began seeing a waitress who worked at the lodge, a woman with 2 young daughters. The daughter of the waitress would later recount her unsettling experiences with him, describing how he initially appeared safe, but that facade quickly crumbled. She recalled an incident when they were down by the river, and Carrie suddenly took all of his clothes off. She felt deeply uncomfortable and, trying to ignore him, turned around and walked further up the river. The disturbing revelations about Carrie continued when Special Agent Jeff Reinick revealed that Carrie had actually stated his intention to kill his girlfriend and her two daughters on February 15th. But when he saw another person on the grounds where they resided, he knew that was no longer an option. So he changed his plan. The 15th of February, 1999, Carrie would later recount. I watched. There was a gray car in space, 509 all by itself. The window was open, the curtain was open, and I could see inside that there were two women and the mother. The following is Carrie Steiner's chilling account of what happened that night. At around 11 p.m., he approached room 49, carrying a toolbox filled with rope, duct tape, a knife, and a gun. He knocked on the door and introduced himself as the motel handyman, explaining to Carol that there was a leak in the room above and he needed to check for water damage on their ceiling. Carol was cautious, looking around for any signs of a leak, but Carrie persisted until she finally allowed him inside. He engaged in small talk at first, ducked into the bathroom to maintain the facade, and then emerged, holding a gun. He told them not to panic, claiming he was only there to rob them. He then tied them up and gagged them with duct tape, moving Selena and Julie to the bathroom before returning to Carol, who was still on the bed. Without a word, he quickly strangled her with rope. I didn't realize how hard it is to strangle a person, he said with chilling detachment. It's not easy. Taking her keys, he dragged her body outside and lifted it into the trunk of the red Pontiac. He went back inside and sexually assaulted Julie and Sina before separating them. He took Julie to the bathroom in the adjacent room and left her tied up so he could clean up the crime scene. He then strangled Sina to death in the bathtub, silencing her forever. At around 4 a.m., Carrie carried Julie out to the car and placed her in the front seat of the vehicle. He later told the FBI that she still didn't know that her mother and Sina were already dead, a testament to his calculated manipulation. He pulled the duct tape from her mouth and then drove west through the dark Merced River Canyon, unsure of his destination, making casual small talk with the terrified girl as they drove. Just before sunrise, he pulled into an empty parking area and took Julie out of the car, carrying her up the hill towards the Don Pedro Reservoir. He later told the FBI that Julie, shivering in the cold, had asked him to carry her. He claimed that he held her in his arms, like a bridegroom carrying his bride across the threshold, a detail that revealed his warped sense of reality. A law enforcement source later suggested that this detail revealed his warped sense of reality. It fit with his fantasy, where there was some kind of relationship between him and Julie. He would later say that he had grown to like Julie, who had given him a fake name, Sarah, saying that he wished he could keep her. Once they reached the overlook, he sexually assaulted her again, brushed her hair out, allegedly told her he loved her, and then slit her throat, ending her young life in a brutal act of violence. He then hid her body, nearly decapitated, in the dense underbrush, concealing his heinous crime beneath the beauty of nature. Carrie was adamant that he had never tortured or sexually assaulted them, even saying bizarrely that he wanted their deaths to be as painless and humane as possible, a statement that defied all logic and reason. He then abandoned the car a few hundred yards down a logging trail off of California 108 and walked 2 miles to Sierra Village. He called for a taxi, paying with the money he had stolen from Carol's purse. The taxi driver, Jenny, was struck by the disheveled, weary-looking man, who asked to be taken to the Yosemite Lodge. Jenny never reported the trip to the police at the time, but after Carrie's arrest months later, she recalled an unusual conversation they had had along the way. "Do you believe in Bigfoot?" he asked. "No," she replied. "You should," he said, "because he's real." Back at the lodge, he appeared completely normal, even taking FBI agents around various rooms around the property so they could take samples. The only time he appeared to mention the murders was when he said to a female co-worker, apparently annoyed at a couple of agents having lunch at the restaurant, "Why didn't the FBI ever search for my brother?" Carrie confessed that he closely followed the FBI investigation, and, when the police didn't return to arrest him, he knew that the impulse to murder again was not one he could ignore. "I would have kept killing until I was caught or killed," he admitted. He said he had been laid off for the winter, as was usual with most staff, but was rehired at the lodge on the 20th of March, the day after the bodies of Carol and Sina were found. He would also admit to writing the letter and sending it to the FBI, detailing where Julie's body could be found, a chilling act of self-promotion, disguised as remorse. Employees at the Cedar Lodge often gathered at a restaurant booth with a view of the trees along the river. Kerry would sometimes join them there, sitting in as they discussed the murders, listening intently to their speculations and fears, feeding his own twisted ego with their unknowingly participation. For the past 2 years, Kerry Steiner had rented a room above the Cedar Lodge restaurant. He worked next door at the motel as a handyman, a seemingly ordinary presence in the lives of those around him. It was at Cedar Lodge that local teens got to know him. We were sitting there swimming. He walked in to do his job around the pool, do some handyman work, and Aaron hollered at him, told him to come over and meet us. And every day after that, pretty much that we were over there, we'd see him and talk to him for about 5 minutes. One teen recounted. Parker Bevington and Aaron Lewig both worked at the Chevron station just down the road from Cedar Lodge. Both young men were stunned that the man they were friendly with had apparently confessed to the killings. They insisted that he couldn't have seemed more normal. I've never even seen the man violent at all. He's never even really raised his voice. Even when we're just sitting there talking, one of the young men said, struggling to reconcile the image of the friendly handyman with the monster he had become. He always made us feel pretty much like we had nothing to worry about. Never made us feel uncomfortable, the other added, a chilling reminder of Kerry's ability to conceal his true nature. Kerry described the first time he had had such dark fantasies. When he was just 7 years old, he had been sitting in his parents' car as they went grocery shopping. He stared through the window of the store, eyes fixed on the female employees at the checkout. He said he started to imagine what it would be like to kill them, a disturbing glimpse into the nascent stages of his homicidal impulses. After that, these fantasies would continue to rear their head, dreams of setting traps for women and murdering them. He said for 30 years he had kept this to himself, never telling a soul, nurturing the darkness in silence. He added that he dreamed of having a TV movie of the week, made about his crimes and life, a testament to his overwhelming narcissism. But what about what had happened to Joey? On the 21st of July, Kerry said he had driven to Festa Road. It was a place that he said he saw Bigfoot, something he was absolutely fascinated with. He said he had been talking about Bigfoot with 26-year-old Joey Armstrong. He said he happened to come across her in front of her cabin, and when he realized that she was by herself, he could not control the urge to murder her. I was just over there throwing rocks in the creek and just happened to notice her walk out again and again. It seemed like she was alone, he said, his voice devoid of any emotion. What follows is what Kerry said happened after he came into contact with Joey. He pulled up and, trying to make her feel less nervous, asked her if she had ever seen Bigfoot. He said he had seen it once in the field behind her cabin. Knowing for sure that she was by herself, he pulled out his gun and made her go back into the cabin. He then tied her up and gagged her with tape before ordering her to go back outside. He forced her into his car and began to drive. Joey, unbelievably, was able to get the door open and leap out of the car as he drove. And she ran as fast as she could through the woodlands, along Crane Creek, heading for her friend's cabin, just a couple of 100 yards away. Kerry stopped the car, got out, and chased her. She was able to get about 150 yards away before he caught up with her. He grabbed her from behind, slit her throat, and continued his attack until she was decapitated. He dumped her body in a ditch and then disposed of her head about 40 feet away, completing his gruesome act of violence. He fled back up to his vehicle and went back up towards the exit, but he didn't get far. His car broke down and refused to move. He then flagged down a park ranger, who gave him a lift. He had just abducted and brutally murdered a woman, but to the ranger, he seemed calm, affable, easygoing. Literally nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Special Agent Reinach, who had got him to talk, said that it felt like he had a sense of relief when he had got it all off his chest. But before Kerry would admit to what he had done, he had tried to bargain. He said he either wanted to get his family to have the reward money, be in a prison close, to them, or, shockingly, see child sexual abuse images of young girls. He told the FBI that his urge to see such material had been gnawing away at me my whole life. It's sick, disgusting, perverted. I know that I can't go to prison for the rest of my life and be happy without seeing it. Reinach asked him to pick one of the options because he had reached a point where even death seemed insignificant, a mere footnote to the tragedies he had already endured. He reportedly said, "What's dying?" as if it paled in comparison to the hardships he'd faced. Yet, despite the invisible scars he carried, Stephen was bravely piecing his life back together. He never complained, never wallowed in self-pity. He was, by all accounts, a truly good-hearted young man. On September 16, 1989, as dusk settled over the city, Stephen was heading home on his motorbike After a long shift as a pizza delivery man, a reckless driver, without warning, pulled their car directly into his path. Stephen, tragically not wearing a helmet, collided with the driver's side door, suffering catastrophic head injuries. The impact was brutal, the sound a sickening crunch of metal and bone. But the driver didn't stop, didn't offer aid, didn't even acknowledge the life they had just shattered. They simply sped away into the night, leaving Stephen bleeding and broken on the asphalt. Less than an hour later, at the young age of 24, Stephen Dana succumbed to his injuries, his life extinguished in an act of senseless violence. His wife, Jody, was consumed by a rage unlike anything she had ever experienced. It would have been a lot different if this man who hit him had stayed. "If it's the last thing I'll do, I'll nail him." "Val," Jody vowed, her voice thick with grief and a burning desire for justice. The driver of the car eventually surrendered to the authorities, but the damage was irreversible. Jody recounted how Stephen was finally finding genuine happiness, building a normal life with their two beautiful children, who were just toddlers, 2 and 3 years old. When their father was stolen from them, Stephen's parents were on a camping trip when the unthinkable happened. Friends frantically tried to reach them, finally tracking them down in the remote wilderness to deliver the devastating news. Grief overwhelmed them, a tidal wave of sorrow that threatened to consume them entirely. His mother felt as though Stephen had only been on loan to them, a temporary gift. A friend recalled how she had been the pillar of strength, calm and composed, throughout the ordeal 7 years prior. But her strength is waning now, the friend confided. This is the hardest thing she has ever had to face, and she just can't talk to anybody, adding that Delbert was devastated, too, but he was the one staying strong. For his wife, attempting to navigate them through this nightmare. "It's fine all this time," Stephen's father had said, attempting to find solace in faith. "I know where Stevie is at now." The documentary, I Know My First Name is Stephen, was nominated for 4 Emmy Awards, a testament to Stephen's extraordinary courage and resilience. Stephen was killed just a day before the awards ceremony, a cruel twist of fate that robbed him of the recognition he so richly deserved. In Applegate Park, a statue stands in Stephen's memory, a lasting tribute to his heroism, his bravery, and the selfless actions that not only saved his own life, but also the life of young Timmy White and perhaps countless other children. But Stephen wasn't the only one whose life left an indelible mark on the world. Founded in Joey's memory, the Armstrong Scholars Program was created to empower young women, providing them with the resources and support they need to pursue their dreams and achieve their full potential. Carol Sund, Julie Sund, Sina Peloso, and Joey Armstrong were not just names in a cold case file. They were vibrant, loving, extraordinary people whose lives were brutally stolen in a place where they should have been safe. Carol was a devoted mother who simply wanted to share the beauty of the world with her daughter. Julie, only 15, was bright, kind-hearted, and brimming with potential, her whole future stretching out before her. Sylvia had journeyed from Argentina, seeking opportunity and adventure, trusting in the inherent goodness of humanity. And Joey was a beacon of light in UCID, a dedicated educator, a loyal friend, someone who passionately believed in protecting nature and sharing its wonders with others. Their lives mattered, they were deeply loved, and they deserved so much more than the senseless violence they endured. As we bring this chapter to a close and conclude this case, let us remember them not only for the tragic circumstances of their final moments, but for the beautiful, unique individuals they were, for the joy they spread, and for the humanity they embodied. In the end, the Yosemite case reminds us of a truth we often overlook. Danger does not always come from shadows or strangers. Sometimes it grows quietly beside us, hidden behind polite smiles, ordinary routines, and the belief that it could never happen here. This story is not only about loss, it is about awareness. The awareness that every community, no matter how peaceful, must stay attentive to the signs we tend to dismiss. It is also a reminder of the strength of those who investigate, search, and speak for victims who can no longer speak for themselves. If this case moved you, let it be more than a moment of fear. Let it be a call to protect one another, to listen, and to act when something feels wrong. Stories like this are difficult, but they matter because they teach us vigilance, compassion, and the importance of valuing every life. Thank you for spending your time with True Crime Vault. Your support keeps this work alive. The research, the storytelling, and the effort to honor real people behind every case. If you found meaning here, please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. And we invite you to continue exploring our other investigations, where more untold stories wait beneath the surface.